How you doing, Dr. Fraser?
I'm doing good.
All right, I'm Jeremy.
Okay, Jeremy.
All right. Today I just want to get to know a little bit about you.
Okay.
Can you tell me a little bit about your education?
Well, I was educated at started. If you're talking about elementary school, was in New York at Manhattan Elementary.
Okay.
That was later called R.T. Hudson. Finished there in the 8th grade. Went to the academy, which was called Northeastern Academy.
Okay.
From Northeastern Academy, I think I spent 2 years there, first in 9th and 10th grade. Then in my 11th year, I moved to high school in New York City called Benjamin Franklin High School. Spent a year there, and then moved to, my parents moved out of the city, and we moved to Goshen, New York, where I went to Goshen High School and graduated from there.
Okay.
From there, I went to Orange County Community College, and actually failed out of community college playing basketball.
Oh, okay.
And then from there, stayed out for about a year or two and working, and then went into the Army. Went into, I was drafted in 1966, I believe it was, yeah, 66, and went to the Army, went to, it was the time of Vietnam, went to Vietnam for my last 8 months of service, and spent that time as I moved through the ranks in the military for 2 years to sergeant, where I was a supply sergeant for a surgical hospital.
Okay.
So, and I left there in '68. I actually got into Vietnam the same day that Martin Luther King was assassinated, which would be April 4th.
Wow.
So I did not experience the event because I was in transit at the time, flying from California to Vietnam. So it was like a big blur for me. When I heard it, it was when we were on the other side in Long Binh, Vietnam, when I heard just a quick blurb, and that was all that I knew about the event. So I've come back, educational-wise, I've come back and had to hear all that happened and transpired during that time.
Wow. Did you ever go back and visit the museum or anything like that?
I have been to several. I got pictures, maybe even on my camera, of the memorial in D.C.
Okay.
And been to the one in Atlanta, and so yeah, that's how I've caught up to some degree educationally about the whole thing. I mean, I've looked at a whole lot of videos and documentaries on that. So that's how I caught up. Okay. But every time I see something about that period, I learned something because I was completely out of the picture, not being in the country at the time.
They have a nice museum in Memphis. Is it the museum?
No, I haven't seen that.
Right.
I haven't seen that. I'd like to see that. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
You know, the Adventist education that you said you went to the academy. How has that played and had an impact on your matriculation in your life?
Well, I guess I would not have had it any other way, as far as, my parents felt that. I talked to my mother this morning about that. And Christian education was a critical part of that, because when I came back from Vietnam, my intent was always to go to Christian school. My short period when I experimented with going to a public institution was the last 2 years of high school, first year of college. And I don't know that those were good experiences that I can equate with my experience in private Christian institution. So from then on, I then went to Atlantic Union College, came out of the military, closest thing to me where my parents lived, and I returned back to New York and to upstate New York, but the closest thing was Atlantic Union. So I went to Atlantic Union and took me 2.5 years to finish school. Okay. So I finished in a quicker time.
Right.
After I blew those first years, but I was serious and committed to come back from Vietnam.
Right.
And I finished in, I think 3.5. I think it was 3.5 years.
Right.
I finished.
Okay, you said you were serious when you came back from
Oh,
Vietnam.
yeah.
After having that Vietnam experience, that military experience,
Mm-hmm.
how does that mold you as far as your future?
You are serious when you see a lot of death.
Oh, okay.
When you have experienced a lot of death and trauma and those kinds of things that impact, you get a different sense of life. You get you rethink the kinds of things that you would think about anymore, because life has changed drastically. Right. I would see people's heads cut off.
Wow.
From bombs, and we had, although I was a supply sergeant for the hospital, there were times when we had mass casualty situations that I had to go into the hospital and help, because my role was to make sure that the hospital had ample supplies to carry them through any kind of contingency, any kind of difficulty.
Okay.
And so I had to keep stock and supplies of medical equipment and all of the everything for the hospital was under my auspices. I had the full responsibility of managing this $5 million at the time, $5 million hospital. Okay. And we think, well, $5 million is not a lot of money.
It was a lot back then, though.
It's a lot back then. It was a lot back then. And matter of fact, we would see, the kinds of equipment that came through was, we had these inflatable kind of units, and we had to manage and maintain those units, and they were run by an air pressure system that would force the air into the domes, and it also kept it cool. But it would also be susceptible to shrapnel, and so it would tear it up as soon as the shrapnel hit the area and hits outside of it. It would destroy it. So
wow. I know that was an experience.
Oh, it was quite an experience. There's no way that you can't get around that experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did that experience? Was it hard? Transitioning from military back to civilization?
Oh yeah, there is always a difficulty with a transition, especially if it's just merely going into the military, as some of my friends did prior to the war. Then that's one thing. But if you're coming back from war, the impact of war on the whole situation is different. Okay, you're gonna run into all kinds of, when a bus would backfire. When I got back into the States, I would jump. I would be ready to hit the ground. Matter of fact, it was interesting how we dichotomized the whole experience. Well, because what we said was that we were out of the world when we were in Vietnam. When we would speak of back to the United States as back to the world. So that's a powerful statement by itself. Living there was like we were out of body, out of world kind of situation.
Yes, sir. And
so that was our adjustment. That's how we adjusted, how we dealt with the situation. So it was definitely an impactful experience. It made the impact of getting you to the point where you said, well, if at any time during the night somebody can throw a rocket in here, drop a rocket in here, and can wipe out this hooch, or we call the buildings that we stayed in hooches. Okay. And it could do that. We had it bunkered around the bottom, but that was really to take care of shrapnel when it hit on the ground. If it hit on the facility, it was all over. So you had to live with that anxiety every single night when you went to bed, or during the day when you were in there. Of course, shrapnel rounds could come, or mortar rounds could come at any time.
Mercy. Wow. Is this the military? Would it be an experience that you would recommend to?
Well, I recommended it to my son, but I didn't recommend the Army. I recommended the Air Force. He was a dentist, and I said, because your father went and served, I don't think my son needs to necessarily serve.
Right.
I think it was good for him to get the discipline of the military. So the discipline of the military is good. Okay. It's good for any man or woman if they want to be, impacted in a significant way, and a transformation that is got to be different from real life. Right. There are some things that are musts, things that you do that you know that's going to change you and transform you, the way you accept orders, the way you respond to them. Really, you realize how powerful that experience is. Having your subordinate and having somebody over you, it was a critical part of that process.
Wow. Okay. Wow, that's an experience that I've thought about myself.
A lot of people think about it as an option because it gets you, it molds you into a person that is clearly different from what you were prior to the time that you entered into the service. So, there's a different discipline of having to get up, having to make moves when the company has to move to make adjustments, and you can't ask the question, well, why are we moving?
Right.
No, you're moving because we're moving.
Right.
So there's a different kind of thing that you had to adjust to.
How many different places did you get a chance to visit? Did you get to go out the country?
Oh yeah. I went. Usually, when you spend time in the war zone, you have what we call R&R. You generally will get recuperation time. So I went to Singapore.
Okay.
I went to Japan. So I at least landed in Japan, but spent time in Singapore, and so in the country, in the United States, I was exposed to the South for the first time because I was raised in the North. Although I was born in Jamaica, but I was raised in the Northeast, and then I went to Jackson, South Carolina, and went to Texas for my training and AIT training, with your advanced technical training, and then from there I had a short station time in Kentucky, at Fort Knox, Kentucky, which was probably about 9-10 months, I guess it was. Okay. And then from there I went to Vietnam, and then I ETS, or left the service out of Vietnam, and really entered back into San Francisco when I came back into the country.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. Well, Dr. Frazier, with all this experience that you have, I mean, how does that? Tell me a little bit about what you do now and how you apply this experience to your career now.
Well, once you traveled out of the country, then you get a sense that you can go anywhere.
Right. Okay.
So, my wife and I have both traveled a lot since